Hello there guys, and welcome back to the channel. So today we are going to be talking about the potential MVPs for week 4 Gladiator circuit meta, and it is going to be quite tricky and definitely roster limiting, like without a doubt. Even though I have like 44 rank 4s for instance, I'm sure that about half if not more of my deck will end up being rank 3s or yeah, well, probably rank 3 champions. But that is to say that majority of the champions that we use daily or casually or normally in Battlegrounds will not work. And the reasons are kind of twofold, because we have double the limiting factor that we normally do. You see, typically when Kabam gives us a meta, they give us one obstacle to overcome. In past, we have had a safeguard meta. Like even this season, we have basically fight or flight and persistent pressure, which are two different nodes, but they do inflict the same burden on the fight, which is spam unstoppable buffs. Before that, we had ebb and flow knockdown, and that was just kind of generic, what we needed to work around. And similar with insult injury, long distance relationship, blood in the water, you know, it's fairly open and it doesn't really limit too much. And this is definitely going to be by far the most limiting. We have had polka dot power in past, and it was fairly specific. And we have had safeguard in past. We haven't had rage. And both of them put together with mystic conditioning is definitely going to impose quite a tricky set of conditions. So obviously, we cannot use champions that rely on a single hit damage, or like massive or big special attacks. So for instance, in a case like this, even though Rintra could technically work because you can gain raptures without any power on the opponent, then you would start getting power, and then you can throw a big level 2, except this time you can't throw a big level 2 because you can't do 1% of your max, 1% more than 1% of opponent's max health as damage in a single hit, which is something that Rintra does. And then obviously we have polka dot power, which effectively means that no power for anyone unless they have access to damage over time effects on their parries, basic attacks, heavy attacks, or has some sort of natural power gain. And that is it. So it's definitely going to be quite tricky. A ton of amazing champions will not work. If you take a look at the Aunt May side, you know, from the top of the head, I know Kingpin will be absolutely unusable. Mr. Fantastic will be unusable. Bishop will have like no offensive power. And Domino will never be able to gain any power. Hulkling isn't gonna really work. He can gain a little bit of power with his abilities. He worked in the polka dot power meta, kind of, but there is still gonna be the problem with 1% damage limit, and he has no way to get around it, so he's not gonna be the greatest. And in general, most of the champions that we kind of rush to rank up will not do the best. So let's take a look at the ones that I think could potentially be the MVPs, or at the very least are worth paying attention to. And we're going to start with the Immortal Abomination. And that is quite easy because you place poisons on the opponent and you're going to be getting power. He doesn't hit hard on his base, he has low crit rate. So it's probably going to be a while till opponent goes unblockable, which is good. He doesn't rely on heavy attacks, and he has pretty much everything going for him to work well in the next meta. The problem is going to be the fact that he's going to be worse as a defender in many cases, because he's going to constantly have damage over time effect on himself. So when opponent's going to use anyone against the Immortal Abomination, they will automatically be gaining power. Now we're going to have Scorpion. Obviously Scorpion is just going to be excellent and amazing. Tons of debuffs pretty much constantly. He was amazing for polka dot power lane, and the powers, we'll see how the power sting damage interacts with rage. I do think that his stings will work the same as power stings allegedly does, and from what I have heard is that even though the rage caps each individual power sting damage, but that is calculated on individual amounts. So for instance, if rage limit is, let's say, 2,500 damage max that you can inflict, then if your power sting would do 3,000 damage per single power sting on a spider ham, let's say, you still get lowered down to that 2,500, but then each individual power sting gets applied directly. So let's say if you have 10 power stings, and they should do 3,000 damage each, and in theory, even opponent uses special attack, they should take 30,000 damage. Then under this node, they would take 25,000 damage instead, because Rage still caps it, but it does get calculated individually. So Power Sling champions are likely going to work quite effectively. Then we have Black Cat. Now with Black Cat, there's going to be good and bad. Black Cat is going to work in all or most of the relevant matchups. She usually did. She will not stop Rage. That's the important thing. On the bright side, she doesn't really hit too hard. The crit rate is quite decent, but the point is that her ability accuracy reduction cannot interact with Rage. However, she does have access to Bleed on her base. And then once you activate that level 2, the Bleed is, quite potent. And in matchups like Rintra, Hulkling, so on and so forth, you can still pause it. It's going to be interesting to see how she works against Thing specifically, but that remains to be seen. Definitely something up to testing. I do think that OG Black Panther could potentially be quite decent nuke. Again, all of the abilities that let him lower opponents' defensive ability accuracy, that is not going to interact with Rage. That cannot stop Rage, but still he has access to quite a lot of bleeds and he can be quite nukish champion. I think Black Widow Deadly Origins is going to be quite an important champion for this meta. I'm a bit envious of people who have taken her to rank 4, because I do think this is going to be pretty much a perfect time for her to shine, because she obviously does have access to quite a lot of shock damage. So she's going to be gaining power at a decent rate. And then obviously her special 2s do bursts of damage, which again, I do think will get capped. So she might suffer slight reduction in damage, but she's probably going to work just about as well anyway. Another champion that I personally will likely add to my deck is going to be Blade. I think Blade's going to be relatively solid dual purpose champion here in this case, because obviously it is going to be trickier to maintain damage over time effects on Blade with his ability to shrug off debuffs quicker. And then obviously offensively should be quite good to counter Spot, Galen, Mephisto if those are run, but in general he has access obviously to bleeds on his parry and should work quite fine. Similarly to Mallman, I think you can start the fight out with like 4 heavy attacks. That's going to give you 16 charges, and then you're just going to go and spam your level 1s and try and finish the fight off, utilizing the shock and bursts of direct damage that you do whenever you inflict bleed on a shocked opponent. So I do think that could work quite well. Obviously, Nick Fury, I think, is going to be one of the most important champions for this meta, because he will be great offensively and defensively. Because imagine Nick Fury unblockable the entire time, and you cannot, quickly nuke him or as easily nuke him. Then we're going to have Omega Red, who I think is going to be very good for the upcoming meta, because he does have 2 different damage sources. Obviously, even if he would not be gaining any power at all ever, you could still do solid amount of damage with him. But I do believe that his heavy attack degen will count as a damage over time effect, because it typically does for nodes like Cornered and so on and so forth. And obviously that will let him gain power as well. So I do think that Omega Red is going to be quite a solid champion. I do think Toad is going to see his time of the day again, because of the constant poisons that you can apply, and especially against skill champions that can do a ton of damage. Obviously, there will be limits to his special attack damage, and it's going to be sooner rather than later when the opponents go unblockable, whilst you're going to be using Toad. So level 2 is going to be, I think, probably quite useless. You do have access to the burst damage there, but I think that's going to be subject to Rage as well, so it's probably going to be just spamming level 1s the entire time. A champion that I actually took to rank 3 for this meta, kind of specifically, one of those champions that I wanted to rank 3 for a while, but I just never got around to, and this was a good reason to get it done, and it's Silver Centurion. I do think Silver Centurion is going to work quite solid. It is quite important to remember that his shocks and plasmas are going to be passive when he's awakened. Only debuff that you will actually be inflicting that is an actual debuff is going to be your Incinerate. And again, if we refer to the node of Polka Dot Power per second while the defender is suffering from a damaging debuff. So passives themselves don't give power to you. So you will want to keep those incinerates up, and once you get your plasmas on the opponent, you will not be able to gain power. But still, ultimately, a champion that does not crit, I think is going to be working fine. But this could be one of those situations where unawakened Silver Centurion could potentially become better, be better than awakened one. Quite likely, unawakened Silver Centurion here in this match would be better than awakened one, which kind of makes me regret awakening him. But whatever, I didn't think that went through. Then we have Infamous Iron Man, and here's going to be quite similar argumentation as I use for Silver Centurion. He's a champion that doesn't crit on his base, so again, he's likely not going to be triggering the rage stack, so you're not going to have to deal with unblockable opponent. And obviously he has access to the shocks on his basic attacks, definite guaranteed shocks on mediums. They're not too long, but you have guaranteed access to them. So I think overall he should be doing quite well. And then obviously we can move on. I think Gore is going to be fantastic. With Gore, you're just going to get a bunch of shadow magic buffs and spam mediums, and then see until opponent goes unblockable. Obviously, then you might need to alter your strategy. In this case, it's probably going to be quite important to remember that your special attack 1 can pause your shadow magic buffs for 6 seconds. Special attack 2 will give you Furies, which you might want to avoid. I'm not entirely sure yet which strategy is going to be the best to still build up to level 3 and then just kind of try and put on as many debuffs on opponent as you can, or just have kind of like a slower paced, more, direct approach with level 1s and maintaining your shadow magic buffs. That's definitely going to be up to testing, but I do think that overall Gore is going to be quite a solid champ. I do think one of the sleeper champs here is going to be Venom. Now, keep in mind that Venom Pool will not work, will not ever be able to gain any power, because Venom Pool accesses damage over time effects only on his special attacks, versus Venom has it on mediums. Additionally to that, I do not believe that his special one counts as a nullify, therefore the Mystic conditioning node will not affect him, and he will be able to continuously eat up those Furies and, basically heal up from that. And then obviously, you have the easy kind of guaranteed access to bleeds. Ideally, make sure you get some precisions with your Clintar buffs, and that will enable you to get more bleeds, which is going to be the name of the game for this entire thing. Hyperion should work a treat. First things first, Hyperion doesn't need to access power gain from Polka Dot Power because he has a very potent power gain of his own. And second thing, obviously, he has access to Incinerates, which also work around Safeguard and trigger Polka Dot Power node for extra power gain. I think Diablo is going to be extremely great champion for this meta. Mystics do suffer, again, from Mystic Conditioning node, where the more you nullify, the less chance of that triggering later. But I still think that still will give you some, extra power virtually in every match, plus on top of his own kind of like poison damage and easy access to it. I think he's going to do fine. I think he's going to do great. It's going to be interesting to see how Tigra works. Again, I do think that Tigra's bursts are going to be subject to the rage, but at the same time, she does have access to a ton of raptures that is all going to be dealing. So I think Tigra is going to work well, perhaps a bit slower, but still very well. And then we have obviously the Dr. Doom, that I think is going to work just fine. I think he's going to work well enough to be included in the decks because he does have access to that shock. On your mediums, you might want to throw less heavies in general. Obviously, then you have the Incinerates from the Special 2. And obviously, your Nullification and Special 1 abilities and Power Steal from Special 1 still also put in work. So I do think that Doom is going to be quite solid. Obviously, there will be more champions that will be worth looking into. And there are some obvious ones that I didn't mention, like Archangel and Human Torch. Obviously, both of them will be extremely crucial and important. But other than that, we're going to have to deal with some very troublesome defensive fights as well. Like, for instance, majority of these champions, if you go over, okay, so I-Bomb and, these two possibly. But yeah, how many good thing counters will we have? How many good Rinter counters will we have? How many good domino counters will we have? Like most of the champions, for instance, in tech class that counted Domino are going to be completely out of it. So for that purpose, I'm kind of thinking of potentially looking at number 1, Mysterio. I think Mysterio and his poison might be quite decent. I do definitely want to refresh my knowledge of Shuri, because Shuri, I believe, cannot get her ability accuracy reduced by mutants, and she should be quite compatible. I know her damage is quite awful, so it still probably would be like 110-second fight or close to timeout going up against Domino. But she might be able to do that fight, which is more than I can say about many champions here. So it's definitely going to be a very challenging and interesting meta. Let me know what you guys think, and I'm going to catch you guys later. See ya. Hello there guys, and welcome back to the channel. So we have all the information about